Joseph was taken down to Egypt, carried far from his father's house and the land of promise. The caravan delivered him into the hands of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Thus, the favored son became a servant in a foreign land. How swiftly fortunes can change. One day, Joseph wore the coat of many colors, beloved by his father. The next, he was stripped of everything: his robe, his freedom, his family, his future. The dreams God had given him seemed to mock him now. Where was the fulfillment? Where was the promise? Yet the Scripture declares something remarkable. The Lord was with Joseph. Even in slavery, he was not abandoned. Even in suffering, he was not alone. This is the great truth that threads through Joseph's story. Not that he avoided hardship, but that God's presence accompanied him through it. Joseph served faithfully in Potiphar's house. Though he had been betrayed by his brothers, he did not give himself to bitterness. Though he had every reason to grow cynical and resentful, he chose a different path. Instead, he worked diligently in all that was placed before him, and the Lord caused all that Joseph did to prosper.
Here we see the true character of true faithfulness. Joseph did not serve well because his circumstances were favorable. He served well because his God was faithful. He did not wait for justice before he would work with integrity. He chose righteousness in the midst of injustice. Potiphar soon noticed that the Lord was with Joseph. He saw that everything under Joseph's care flourished. Fields were fruitful, affairs were orderly, the household prospered, and Joseph found favor in his master's sight. In time, Potiphar entrusted everything to Joseph's oversight. He made him overseer of his house, placing all that he had into Joseph's hands. The Scripture tells us that with Joseph in charge, Potiphar concerned himself with nothing except the food he ate. Thus, though Joseph was a servant, the Lord lifted him to a place of responsibility. Even in a pagan household, even as a slave, God gave Joseph influence and authority. This is the mysterious way of providence, God preparing his servant, even through unlikely means. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time Potiphar's wife cast her eyes upon him. She spoke to him, saying, "Lie with me." But Joseph refused. Listen to his response, for it reveals the foundation of his integrity. He said to her, "Behold, my master trusts me with all that he has in this house. There is no one greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Notice what Joseph understood. This was not merely a matter of betraying his earthly master's trust, though that alone would have been grave. This was fundamentally a sin against God. Joseph lived with a consciousness of God's presence. His integrity was not dependent on who was watching, but on the fact that God always sees.
Day after day she spoke to Joseph, but he would not listen. The temptation did not come once and vanish. It persisted. It returned. It pressed upon him. Yet Joseph stood firm. He would not betray his master's trust, nor would he sin against the Lord. One day, when the men of the house were absent, she caught him by his garment and again demanded that he lie with her. But Joseph fled. He left his garment in her hand and ran outside. Sometimes faithfulness requires running. Sometimes the wise choice is not to argue or negotiate with temptation, but to flee from it entirely. Joseph understood this. He did not trust in his own strength to resist. He removed himself from the situation. Seeing that he had fled and left his garment behind, she caught the garment and used it as false evidence. She called to the men of the house and falsely accused him. She claimed that Joseph had come to dishonor her. When Potiphar returned, she repeated the accusation. Potiphar's anger was kindled, and Joseph, though innocent, was taken and cast into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Once again, Joseph suffered not for wrongdoing, but for righteousness. Once again, he was removed from a place of favor and placed into affliction. The very garment left behind as he fled temptation became the instrument of his condemnation. How crushing this must have been, to do the right thing and suffer for it, to flee from sin and be punished as though he had committed it, to honor God and lose everything again. Yet the scripture declares it again. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love.
This is the pattern we must understand. God's presence does not always mean comfort or ease. God's favor does not always look like worldly success. Sometimes God is most present with us in the prison, in the trial, in the place of suffering. Even in the prison, the keeper saw that the Lord was with him. Joseph found favor there also. Soon, the keeper of the prison entrusted to Joseph the care of all the prisoners. Whatever was done there, Joseph was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever Joseph did, the Lord made it prosper. Do you see the pattern? In Potiphar's house, Joseph was faithful, and God caused him to prosper. In the prison, Joseph was faithful still, and God caused him to prosper there as well. The location changed, the circumstances grew darker, but Joseph's character remained constant, and God's presence remained sure. Thus Joseph remained in prison, not forgotten by God, though forgotten by men. The path before him was still hidden. The dreams of his youth seemed distant, perhaps impossible. Yet the hand of the Lord continued to guide him, shaping his character through trial, preparing him for purposes yet unseen. God was not absent. God was at work. In the waiting, in the suffering, in the silence, God was preparing Joseph to bear the weight of the authority he would one day hold. He was refining his character, deepening his dependence, strengthening his faith. And so the story continues of a faithful servant tested in hardship, upheld by the presence of God, of a man who chose righteousness when it cost him everything, of a God who never abandons his own, even when the way is dark and the wait is long.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you won't miss my next incredible story about Joseph and his amazing journey. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Your support means everything.